Well, it's good to know you don't plan to leave anytime.
I know, right?
So that's where you start.
Recording yet?
It's just taken a little bit of time. I'm not quite sure why.
A couple things on.
Alright.
Okay, we're done.
Good.
Or something else.
Yep.
Maybe
Yes.
you need one of those chains that you can make, like you kids make with construction paper.
I put the rest of it.
All right, we open the meeting of the Queen County IDA. Need a motion to approve the November 12th.
Make a motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, project authorization resolution for 100 Dunn Road.
So we had a public hearing last week for 100 Dunn Road in the town of Lyons. It was, a public hearing. We did not have anyone from the public to speak and provide any comment, nor did we receive anything in written as well. But we do have Steve Morgan here, just to talk about the project. I know he talked a little bit about it last month. So he can give you a quick overview of the project and then see if there's any questions.
Right here, fine, or up front? Okay. Good morning, everyone. Steve Morgan.
Yep.
Road, with Town Board Disposal. We are proposing a project for the industrial park over in South Lyons on Dunn Road. It's a 12,000 square foot facility. Approximately 20% of that would be office area, administrative offices in the front part of the building. The middle part of the building would be repair bays for truck maintenance and repairs. And the back part is a truck wash bay. We have a solar component to the building where we have solar panels on the roof. We've obtained all the proper permits through the town lines for a special use permit, and then we've done public hearings. We have all the approvals to move forward with the building. So we provide service for Wayne County, Cuba County, Onondaga, and Monroe. And this is kind of in between our Rochester office and our Syracuse office. It's a good middle point logistically, and it's also close to the local landfills that we use. So that's the reason that we want to do it. We currently have a shop in Wolcott. We're going to keep that open for some welding repairs and then move our office and more of our operations on. Questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Step 2 of 2, project authorizing resolution.
Yeah, what? The motion, motion carries.
Second.
Thanks, Pam, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
We're good.
Thanks for coming, Steve.
Thank you.
Payless. Alright. 25 Board of Directors meeting schedule discussion.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
So we'd like to present the board meeting dates for 2025. We have them all listed here. We kept with the 4th Tuesday of the month, as long as that still fits for people's schedule. I did highlight Wednesday, November 12th, because if we did it on Tuesday, November 11th, I think a lot of people would be out of work that day and not be able to make it. And then we also have both the November and December meetings are always a little adjusted due to the schedules, due to holiday schedules. Does anyone have any thoughts, comments? Amanda, I know we just sort of briefly touched base about timing. Do you think we could maybe start the meeting at 9:05? Because I know sometimes we have trouble with people getting into the building.
Great, because sometimes you wait.
Yeah.
Let's say 9:10.
Right.
10 after?
Okay, 9:10, does that work for people's schedules?
Sure.
Just gets really awkward standing out there and we can't get in.
Oh,
You guys are
Try
saying here, so
walking
you
out,
don't.
and they're like, oh, it's open. No, I gotta shut the door behind
Just
me.
saying if we
I
push
get
it
it.
back a few minutes, we could just.
They could get bed. So we'll shift it to 9:10.
Alright.
Right now, you know. that.
Yeah, yeah.
Subject to change.
Just for tennis tonight, so I can be on time.
That's what I was thinking.
Right, so we saw
Oh,
the,
wait a minute, I skipped the resolution. Well, the
No,
resolution, we'll
I can
work
go over it
through.
first, then you can
Yeah,
approve it if you'd like.
It'll be fine. Yeah,
Um, So in October, we saw the Paris budget, which is just like a big budget that is dictated which items to put into it. These are more detailed, so this spells out, the first page is the summary. The first page is the summary. Now the audit and finance committees did meet this morning and we reviewed in detail each line item of the budget. That includes all of our incomes and all of our expenses, both in respect to the unreserved and the reserved monies. Reserved monies are namely for items we get directly from the county. Unreserved are like agency fees or application fees and stuff like that. All in all, we're looking really good and we proceed to see a net income for the next year.
I make a motion we approve as submitted.
Thanks, Pam. Hey, Pam, okay.
Next page is the account balances. This is now a little early compared to when you're normally seeing it, but this is as of December 2nd. Everything is relatively the same. It did go down a little bit from Q3 to the current December, and that's because the pilot payments were paid out to all the taxing jurisdictions. All those checks have cleared and we are ready for 2025. Next page is our budget versus actuals. Again, this is as of December 2nd, so there's still going to be a little bit more income that we plan on and a couple more expenses through the end of the year, but we are relatively going to be around the same percentage. So about 83% of the budgeted net income is where we're probably going to end up around. We do have a pilot closing scheduled for next week for OptiPro. That's $15,000 that'll be coming in. Along with a couple expenses, which is the pitch competition sponsorship, just some small details, room fee rentals, stuff like that.
We may potentially have 2 pilot closings next week.
Okay. Good.
Good.
Right.
Thoughts, comments, questions on the report format, and I'm trying to give you guys kind of a scale. I'm happy to discuss anything here. General updates on the Butler Correction Facility. We continue to push forward, and then I appreciate whoever's available taking the time for our special meeting. We're trying to keep pace and check boxes as quickly as we can. We are still subject to ESD's process and including their for approval on the final transaction, but we're working through the process on that. Questions on the correction facility project? I'll say timelines continue to move on this one. We are pressing the state, as like us, is subject to a 90-day public notice on disposition of property, and we are still waiting for them to make that notice. So every day that goes by adds another day to the 90-day window and timeline on that transaction. But we're working through local permitting right now. For the next couple of weeks, we'll check those boxes, seeker, and then do our best to facilitate that transaction, get that property back into the private sector hands, and move forward. Can you mention OptiPro? We have a pending application. I'm answering some questions. The state water, wastewater capacity continues to be a question on business attraction and new development projects, along with electricity and natural gas, in particular electricity. Lots of ongoing dynamic discussions. Senator Helming held a meeting with a group of folks, mostly residential subdivision developers, and my counterpart in Ontario, IDA, just continue the discussion and give her an idea about what this is impacting and the scale of the issue, and it's an issue. We're okay as a county, for the most part, up in the west side, up until about, up and through Lyons, we've got anywhere in the system, maybe around 5 megawatts of capacity, which can accommodate a decent sized project, but not a huge one. The east side, as always, it's been it's thinner on the electricity side of things, but I'm keen on the stuff that we can control, which is water and wastewater, in particular the capacity of the treatment plants. Saw how that, well, the state stepped up and provided a very substantial grant to Webster to accommodate the Fairlife project, but evaluating and understanding the capacity within our wastewater and water system, I think, is an important step towards being more prepared to attract new projects. So optimistic on that application, but continuing to ask questions. Last thing I'll mention, it gets hot and cold. We've been copied on a few emails internally between the county and us, which is also the county, but also when the IDA had on the potential or the transfer of the property that constitutes the Ontario Railroad and the management of that asset within the IDA, which I think makes a ton of sense. There's lots of precedent out there. In fact, it would give us a home, be paying attention and review the financials on the operation of the railroad, the services that are moving around. I think we've always had a good relationship with folks who have been change in management over there. I think we're discussing business opportunities along the way. In fact, there's an attraction project looking regionally that is interested in, generally speaking, the necessity of their operation is access to land. So continue to have that back and forth relationship with them. Given the same general mission, I think it makes a lot of sense for us to be working with them. Working through the nuances and details relative to that, it was very, very, the entire transaction between Penn Central transfer or abandonment of a rail line transfer to the county and acquisition of those assets happened a long time ago. There's lots of old documentation in that. The most complicated part of the whole thing is the operation of the railroad on the NYSEG property along Route 104. The access agreement that was established when the asset was first acquired, and working through the rest of the details of the IDA's acquisition of those rights. Legally complicated, referring to council on that. Head in the right direction, but some other nuances and details. Biggest topic of conversation, and if you guys want, it continues to be housing, I think. We are seeing IDA supported market rate housing projects in New York, which is not typical business.
Typically, we have not.
Correct, right, yeah, ever. It has come up periodically. There was a proposal many years ago now, this one, for housing subdivision behind Wegmans in New York that requested a pilot. And I've been keen on, on behalf of IDA board, making sure that we're not, the IDA has the powers, if you will, to provide pilots for projects without local approval. But we are partners with these communities, and I'm keen on making sure that if we're providing substantial property tax benefits, that the municipalities and the school districts are on board with that idea. So continue to play it from that perspective, although you may want to consider some level of a model, if you will, or an amendment to all these things are on the table relative to what, if we're serious about supporting housing projects, what kind, to what extent, what regulations are on that. Monroe County's pilot requires a percentage of this 20% of their units being affordable, which I expect is 80% of the area median income as far as that whole threshold. Food for thought.
Is there any study or data that indicates why all of a sudden we're having a housing crisis in New York, and also notice the certain demographic like lower income earners that are coming up short on housing, or
I think it's dynamic. You know, there are national studies. Katie and I are part of a peer network in New York that we're talking about the housing issue as we speak. We're in the middle of that.
I think there's a few factors that come into play when it comes to housing. One of the aspects of it is the age of housing. So in New York State, we have a lot of older housing, so a lot of them are just getting out of use because of the age of them and the condition that they're in. So that's one factor. Another factor is that we have smaller households. So you know, what used to be a 4.2 family is now maybe a 3.1 family size. So we need more housing, but there's gonna be less people living there. So that's another factor that comes into play. And the amount of housing that we've replaced with the old housing has decreased as well. So you can see some of those trends that are happening. And so that it's not just a Wayne County issue, as Brian mentioned, it's definitely a New York State issue, as well as a lot of the West Belt.
I think it's generally national. You know, I mean, there are the bigger macro, I mean, cost of construction, if we talk to the housing.
Right.
You know, like cost of construction or cost, you know, it doesn't balance out with, well, not to mention interest rates are a little different, right? So if you take into account the cost of construction and interest rates, the affordability of purchasing a single family home. There's kind of back in the envelope now, like 30% of your income should be dedicated to your housing and no more than that. We're looking at and evaluating the county itself based on the data that we have available. There are households who are spending 50% of their income on housing. So it's, you know, increase wages, push down interest rates, and then at the end of the day, subsidizing the cost of construction, whether it's through pilots or we have a pending application to the state, should hear any day now, CDBG funds to buy down the cost of construction for affordable units. Those units we marketed at and will only be available for people who meet income thresholds based on household size. One parent, two parent, how many kids, family size. But I'm not, you know, any of those factors could impact.
Yeah, just trying to understand why. I mean, I think probably another factor is just rising property taxes. I mean, especially anyone who lives in a village. I mean, it becomes a significant component to their overall mortgage as well. So I mean, it's just whenever you try to take on a problem, it's good to understand all the different nuances.
I agree. And, you know, it's interesting. It's the total sidebar, I suppose, but the tax rate and the assessed values, so assessments, municipality, town reassesses all of their property, and the property gets more, it's worth more. The tax rate typically, when I started with the county, we were at $7, let's say $7.50. I think the new tax rate's around $5.
$5.89.
$5.89. So the tax rate going down, value of property going up. Generally speaking, there should be a balance if incomes keep pace with the changing dynamic, all that stuff. I think there's a bit of roller coaster that goes on with market adjustment like that. But at the end of the day, I think the biggest part of the discussion is there is a need to subsidize housing if we're interested in it. And there is, Onondaga County, from my perspective, maybe because we're close by, is probably being the most aggressive. Almost definitely because of the Micron deal, and you know, they're interested in making sure they have the housing to support that. We're likely, I think, already starting to see opportunities and spin-offs, if you will, of that Micron deal. And we will moving forward for sure. The question is, you know,
And I think the factor also comes into play about workforce housing. You know, when you take a look at when site selectors come, when people come to look at, you know, areas to build their business at, they're like, well, where are we gonna get our staff? You know, do you have the people here in the county to be hired to work at our facility? Or where's the closest city? Because we don't have a city, which, and if we're talking about Lyons right now, that would be Geneva. If we're talking about Baskin, that would be Rochester. But so that is one of the questions we also have to consider, as well as the workforce development piece as well.
The workforce piece is kind of on Ontario County's focus. It's not the affordable or the low income, it's the workforce,
Housing.
affordable, right,
United,
market rate, housing, workforce, housing, and they did a big housing study, but one of the things I remember that kind of came out of that too for the need is that people are staying in their houses longer. So like the larger 4-bedroom house that typically someone may have moved out of as they would have aged out of it, they're aging in place. So those houses aren't opening up for younger families.
well, people are
move in.
sitting on houses because interest rates were so low. Why would I get out of a mortgage that's offering me 2 or 3% and get into a new mortgage on a new home that is 7 or 8%?
It'd be interesting to see if that study was done in Maine County, if it would be different.
We did a study. We finished our housing study before Ontario. There's lots of similarities between them.
It is similar, yes.
The workforce housing is a way to connect housing and economic development. And it makes sense. I mean, all housing is workforce housing. If you really want to take a broad brush to it.
But more of the market rate versus
But that's in
the lower income.
and the justification for the IDA to support housing projects. We need this to support the attraction and the job growth stuff.
Is there another agency in the county that their role is housing?
No, and that's my hope. We've been talking about it. I'm on the land bank board. We've talked about this. The land bank, WCIDA playing a role in housing. Planning department, WCIDA, but we're not a housing authority. We have a pending application to do a housing rehab program to Kate's point about the aging housing stock. Again, out of our study, for me, that was the most alarming number was that about half of the housing stock in Wayne County was built through 1940. So finding opportunities to facilitate reinvestment in that housing stock and maintain that quality. I think it's all sorts of other things getting ahead of the whole derelict property issue, code enforcement, all those dynamic things that it's definitely not centralized anywhere. A lot of it is cooperation between county level government, state, local, town, village government.
Do other counties have a specific housing arm?
Monroe County certainly is
Yeah.
a pretty robust, the Rochester Housing Authority, there's
Right.
lots of folks. Monroe County folks that-
Ontario County too?
So Ontario County, didn't, I read recently that, they didn't have property taxes due to either Delago or the landfill were heavily subsidized and.
Seneca,
Oh, yeah, sorry.
They don't have any property taxes. Where the landfill is.
Okay.
Take care of all theirs. And I think Tiger is probably about the same way with all of them.
It's nice.
Well, everybody saw the announcement,
They did vote to close
the
the-
closure of the
the
Ontario
dump
County
yard.
landfill, right? And there's discussions in Seneca, some issue. That's the question. So I mean, it would dynamically change revenue sources for those municipalities. Full circle in, housing, the IDA's role, not being a housing development authority, but if there's a market need to subsidize even market rate housing, which generally is off the table for the most part relative to IDA's support. For the most part in general, industrial, type projects. We've done some deviations and we have adaptive reuse part of our uniform tax exempt policy. Food for thought, we're not recommending anything, we're keeping tabs on who's doing what, reviewing potential recommendations on policy, but it's possible we could come to you guys, but we can, in the interim, we could be approached by a housing developer who says, I'm interested in developing 50, 100, 200 more units here, if for support from the IDA. Want to be prepared for that.
I just feel like, I mean, I understand there's a housing issue. I just feel like our core mission is not housing. I understand how it relates to business and potential business, but it's, sometimes I think it's challenging. We can't be everything to everybody. And if we change our focus, will we, does it change our mission? Or is there, I agree that the county needs to have something, but are we their answer? Turn that to you.
It tends to be, it's not even the county per se in Monroe, it's the housing authority, which is a standalone, not-for-profit, if you will. We're in that business. we work with part of Path still, an example of a partner we work with on farm worker housing, where we have program. A lot of times, we just this department, it's IDA or all stuff together, we're interested in running a pilot rehab program, kind of demonstrate, here's how you do it. You know, it'll be a drop in the bucket as far as impact. 750, I don't remember the exact dollar amount we're looking at.
Oh, for the application, I think it was.
I think it was 750,000, so we can do the math on a housing rehab.
Some projects.
Right.
I think the one thing to consider when it comes to this is typically when you look at other housing agencies and other counties and communities, when they get a lot of their funding, it is for low income housing primarily. The opportunity here is where you can really create the opportunity for fixed income. And it's not saying that I'm advocating one way or the other, but I know the governance committee has talked about this and talked about maybe focusing a little bit more on what the current situation here is in the county, but not really taking any action right now. But that being said, the one approach that could be taken is, again, that mixed income approach of it just not being primarily affordable housing.
And I believe that's what Oswego County is doing. I mean, especially down near the water, they've got a variety of different types of housing, and obviously they'll target it in different groups or income strata. But it's probably the city. I mean, the city's very progressive in trying to address issues like that.
There's a developing mixed use project in Huron that has a substantial housing component, has other center and other things going on. I would not be surprised if everything comes together, approaches us about potential assistance on the IDA side of things. So nuances to consider: straight housing, mixed income housing.
This is in Huron.
Huron's an interesting place.
Apparently everyone's tight-lipped about that. I haven't heard anything about that yet.
And I guess just one other point, you know, when you take a look at housing, where developers make the most money is with the big homes, 3,000 square foot homes, the larger properties, where you can get a lot of subsidies from the state and federal government for affordable housing. So there's that middle market that often gets missed, and that's where I think a lot of the challenges are starting to occur when it comes to housing affordability and availability.
For sure.
When
When you're in the mortgage business, availability of housing right now is a killer.
$400,000 to build a medium market single family home. Half on that mortgage, what do you need, 30% of the director, or what do you need to make to be able to afford that home? That's the real tough math of it all.
And for us, it's more the availability of just homes. People want to buy a house, and they can't find.
A lot of people have come into the country in the last few years and so you can't buy the house.
Right.
You know,
Well, thanks, Clint, if there's an opportunity, maybe we need to build more houses. But are they affordable for people who are looking for that? It's about how that happens. Or where would they go?
Depends where you're building the park, right?
But
Affordability.
Well, I was in a meeting with her, which was scheduled for an hour, went over like an hour and a half, and it was about as much time as we, talked to the housing developers, permitting, and the cost of construction are their two biggest pain points. So they can get it through local permitting, whether having properties zoned appropriately for multi-family, so all that local stuff.
And
One of the biggest
near
things we
wetland,
get-
well, I was
because
gonna
if DC
say-
gets involved, you're done.
And I was gonna say infrastructure too, is,
Water,
having a
sewer,
place where you don't have to do the road, the electric and everything else.
trying to water.
Well,
Big thing, cable and water are the two things young couple look for.
I hesitate to use the phrase
No, we got to keep
smart
it
growth
going.
though, I would, a lot of cases, you don't probably have to accept infrastructure. The more adjacent it is to existing infrastructure, the more affordable it is for that municipality to extend infrastructure to set. So considering what's adjacent to already developed areas, not to mention the balance and farmland protection and all other stuff and planning side of the office, endeavoring to help inform decision making. But I'll stop there. Housing continues to be a pervasive part of a lot of the conversations we're having. I don't have anything to propose to you guys or anything like that today, but we are finger on the pulse and things, we're hearing what's going on around us. And if possible, we can either see a project or we can bring a policy recommendation to you guys.
Okay. Other business? None? Next board meeting is December 19th, a special one. Butler.
Oh, it's the 19th, yeah. I won't.
Motion to adjourn. And Pam,
No, I do actually need to get out of the IDA, but thank you for checking. So,